The last survivor of the light. The planet burned. Ash fell from the sky like snow. The trees were gone. The rivers were dry. Mountains lay broken, and the stars above were hidden by smoke. Zira stood alone on a black hill, her armor cracked, her skin stained with blood and dust. Behind her were the remains of her people's great city. Nothing was left but twisted metal and silent streets. She was the last of the Velari, a proud warrior race that once lit up the stars with their song and fire. But that was before the darkness came, before it swallowed planets and turned hope into ashes. Now, Zira fought alone. Her breathing was heavy. Her hands gripped her energy blade, its glow weak. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. Her wounds burned, but her eyes were still sharp, golden and bright. She would not give up. Not yet. A deep sound shook the ground. Boom. She turned quickly. In the sky, a shadow moved, long and dark, like a serpent of smoke. One of them was coming. A hunter. She ran. Her boots slammed against broken stone. She jumped over ruins, dashed through collapsed buildings, and slid under a broken pillar. Behind her, the ground cracked. The hunter had landed. A loud, whispering voice filled the air. "You are alone. Surrender." Zira didn't answer. She ran into a tunnel and pressed her back against the wall. Her heart pounded. She turned off her blade's light and listened. The hunter was moving closer, slow, calm, confident. She held her breath. Then, crash. A sudden light flashed in the sky. Something was falling. Fast. A fireball cut through the clouds and smashed into the nearby hills. The impact was loud and shook the tunnel. The hunter stopped. Zira used the moment. She moved silently out of the tunnel and sprinted toward the crash site. She didn't know what had fallen, but if it could distract a hunter, it might help her escape. She reached the edge of the crater. Smoke rose from the broken ground. A ship had crashed, its metal body torn and burning. It wasn't Velari. It wasn't darkness. It was unknown. Zira moved closer, her blade ready. Then, movement. A hand pushed through the smoke. Fingers gripped the edge of the ship. A figure climbed out, tall, 2 arms, 2 legs, wearing a burnt flight suit. Zira froze. A human. She had heard the stories. A distant species, thought to be extinct when the darkness reached their star system. And yet, here he was, alive. The man coughed hard. Blood ran down his face, but when he saw her, he didn't scream. He didn't run. He smiled. "Hey," he said, voice rough. "You don't look like a shadow." Zira raised her blade. "Who are you?" He raised his hand slowly. "Name's Jack. Jack Carter. Pilot. Or I was. I think I crashed your moon." "You're human," she said, eyes narrowing. "Yeah, sorry about that." Zira didn't laugh. She stepped closer, unsure if it was a trick. The darkness could wear faces, could lie. Jack looked around. "You alone out here?" She said nothing. "Figures," he muttered. "Everyone's alone now." A silence passed between them. Then, boom. The hunter had arrived. Shadows spilled across the crater. Its voice hissed like wind. 2 lights to snuff out. How lovely. Zira cursed. She grabbed Jack's arm and pulled him toward the rocks. "Hey, whoa," he shouted. "Quiet," she snapped. They rolled behind cover just as a black beam hit the ground where Jack had stood. The air burned. Jack looked at her. "That thing's after you." "It's after everything," she said. He pulled a small device from his pocket. "I might be able to blind it. 1 shot. Give me 5 seconds. You'll die. I've crashed a ship and met a sword lady today. Might as well go for a high score." Zira blinked. Was this what humans were like? She nodded. "On my mark." They waited. The hunter moved closer, long limbs stretching, red eyes glowing. Zira stood. "Now." Jack stood beside her and pressed the device. A blast of light exploded like a sun, burning the air. The hunter screamed and fell back, blinded. Zira jumped forward, blade slicing. Sparks flew as her blade met the creature's armor. But it was too strong. The hunter struck her. She flew back and hit the ground hard. Jack yelled. He grabbed a metal rod from the wreckage and ran toward the creature. Zira opened her eyes just in time to see Jack leap and slam the rod into the creature's eye. A second of silence. Then a shockwave threw them both to the ground. The hunter vanished into the air, shrieking in rage. Zira lay on the ground, staring at the sky. Her body ached. Her head spun. Jack crawled beside her, coughing. Did we win? No, she whispered. But we survived. Jack grinned. Good enough for me. Zira looked at him. For the first time in years, she wasn't alone. A human among ghosts. Zira watched the human from a distance. He sat near the wreckage of his ship, legs crossed, arms resting on his knees. Smoke still rose from the broken engine, and sparks blinked like dying fireflies around him. But he didn't seem worried. He was calm. Too calm. Most people screamed when the darkness came. Most ran. Most fell to madness. But Jack Carter just stared at the sky. He looked peaceful. It bothered her. Zira had never trusted peace, not since her world turned to dust, and certainly not from a stranger who smiled after meeting a death beast and barely surviving. She kept her blade close, glowing faintly blue in the dim air. Her golden eyes watched every movement he made. If he reached for a weapon, she'd strike first. But Jack didn't reach for anything, except a small square packet from his jacket. He tore it open with his teeth and began eating dried food like he had all the time in the world. Zira finally stepped out from the shadows. Do you even understand where you are? She asked coldly. Jack looked up and raised an eyebrow. Yeah, crashed on a ruined planet, running from a creepy shadow monster, talking to an alien warrior with a glowing sword. He took another bite. Did I miss anything? Zira narrowed her eyes. This planet used to be called Illurian. It was once home to billions. Jack paused. His smile faded. I'm sorry, he said quietly. She didn't expect that. You don't even know them, she replied. No, Jack said, but I know what it feels like to lose everything. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded photo. He didn't show it to her, just looked at it with a faraway expression. I had a sister, he said. She loved the stars, always wanted to visit alien planets. She never got the chance. What happened? Zira asked, her voice softer now. He looked up at her. The darkness came, he said simply. They were quiet for a long time. Then Jack stood up, dusted off his pants, and smiled again. So what now? Do I follow you around, or do you plan to leave me here for round 2 with Mr. Shadowclaws? Zira studied him for a moment. Then she turned and walked away. Jack didn't move. Okay, that's a little rude. After a few seconds, Zira stopped and looked back. Well, are you coming or not? Jack's face lit up like a kid offered candy. They moved through broken ruins, the remains of ancient cities crumbling beneath their feet. Tall towers stood half destroyed, their tops broken off like snapped bones. Statues lay shattered. Everything smelled like ash and old smoke. This place gives me the creeps, Jack muttered. They say the souls of the dead whisper here, Zira said. Great, Jack said, glancing around nervously. Ghosts. Just what I needed. Zira smirked a little, for the first time in years. As night fell, they found an abandoned station, a hidden military outpost buried under a mountain. It still had power, apparently. Lights flickered, doors creaked, but it seemed safe. For now. Inside, the halls were dark and cold. The walls were scratched with strange symbols, warnings written by long-gone hands. Jack touched a panel on the wall. Human tech, he said, surprised. You recognize it? Yeah. This was ours. Earth tech. Real old though, maybe 100 years before the fall. Zira stepped forward. You think it still works? Jack knelt near a terminal, brushed off the dust, and pressed a few buttons. Nothing. Then, click. A soft light turned on. The screen blinked. Welcome, Jack Carter. Protocol. Humanity's last hope. Zira froze. Jack stared at the screen. What the hell? He didn't remember ever being part of a program. He wasn't military. He was just a freighter pilot. A nobody. Are you hiding something from me? Zira asked, stepping closer. Jack shook his head. I swear, I don't know why it said that. Zira didn't lower her weapon. Not yet. Jack scanned the terminal, and suddenly, blueprints appeared. A weapon. A glowing sun-shaped structure, code-named Project Dawnflare. This is a solar engine, Jack said. A weapon made to fight the darkness. Zira's eyes widened. I thought it was a myth. No, Jack said, pointing. It's real. And look, there's a star map. Coordinates. But it's deep in the void sector, Zira said. That's where the darkness is strongest. Jack looked at her. Then that's where we go. Suddenly, the lights flickered violently. Zira spun around. The hallway behind them turned black, unnaturally black. A low growl echoed through the station. The hunter, she whispered. Jack backed up. It followed us. No, this is something worse. The walls began to bleed shadow. A cold wind blew through the corridor, but there were no doors open. Whispering voices filled the air. Names, screams, memories that weren't theirs. Zira pulled Jack back. We have to leave. Now. But the main door was sealed tight. The shadows were everywhere. Then, from the darkness, a voice came. Not the hunters. It was human. Jack, come home. Jack turned pale. That's my sister's voice. It's not real, Zira said. Don't listen. But Jack stepped forward. Jack, Zira yelled. He froze, closed his eyes, then turned back to her. I know it's not her, he whispered. He took her hand. I'm not alone anymore. Zira looked at him, surprised. Together, they ran into the darkness, not away from it, but through it, toward the only exit left. The station collapsed behind them, but they made it out alive. Echoes in the void. The sky above the planet was quiet again. Zira and Jack stood on a rocky cliff, their faces lit by the dim glow of a dying moon. Behind them, the hidden outpost burned slowly, releasing smoke that stretched into the stars like a final cry. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Zira checked her arm. The gash had reopened during their escape. Her armor was cracked, and she was losing strength. Jack, however, looked even worse. Not physically, but mentally. He was pale, shaking, staring off into nothing. You okay? Zira asked. He didn't answer. Jack. His eyes blinked slowly. She knew things. My sister's name. Her voice. Her last words before Earth fell. Zira stayed quiet. I don't understand, Jack whispered. How does the darkness know all that? Zira sat down beside him. Because it listens. It watches. It doesn't just destroy planets, Jack. It takes your memories, your grief, your love, and uses them against you. Jack looked at her, eyes full of pain. Then how do we fight something like that? She answered without hesitation, with something stronger than fear. Hours later, they traveled again. Jack had repaired part of the crashed ship's engine. It wasn't perfect, but it worked, barely. As the small shuttle rose into the atmosphere, Zira uploaded the coordinates to the ancient map they found inside the outpost. Their next destination, the Lost Drift, a space region known only in myth and old soldier songs, a place where stars once lived but now only void remained. A graveyard. Jack looked at the controls. The fuel won't get us there. Zara leaned over. We don't need to arrive with grace. We just need to arrive. He gave her a look. You sound like someone who crashes often. I sound like someone who survives. Jack smiled slightly. The ship jumped into the void. The moment they arrived, the stars disappeared. It wasn't just dark. It was emptiness. The lost drift had no light. No planets. No suns. Just broken ships, millions of them, floating silently through the dead space like bones in an ocean. Zara stared out the window. These were the final fleets, she said, from all across the galaxy. They'd made their last stand here. Jack nodded, and they all lost. As the ship moved forward, shadows flickered between the debris. Ghost signals pinged softly through the speakers. Old messages, looped cries for help, coordinates no longer valid. Jack tried to shut them off, but Zara stopped him. Let them speak, she said. It's all that's left of them. The air grew cold. Suddenly, a ship appeared on the scanner. It was huge, 10 times larger than theirs, a cruiser-class warship from Earth's golden age. Zara leaned in, still active. Jack's eyes widened. Power readings are low, but not zero. They approached slowly. As they neared, the lights of the warship flickered once, like an eye blinking after years of sleep. A docking port opened. Jack and Zara exchanged looks. Trap? He asked. Of course, she replied. And yet, they went inside anyway. The warship was called ESS Everreach. Inside, the air was stale. Lights flickered. Broken robots lay on the ground, and wires hung from the ceilings like vines. The ship had been silent for decades, maybe longer. They moved through the empty halls, weapons ready. Every step echoed. And then, voices. Commander Hastings, we've lost engineering. Send word to Earth. This is our last chance. Ghost recordings played from broken speakers as they passed. Memories trapped in machines. But one voice stood out. Jack Carter, you are not supposed to be here. Jack stopped. What did it say? Zara turned quickly, weapon raised. A light turned on at the end of the hall. A control panel. A figure stood in front of it. A man in a long coat. His back was to them. Jack Carter, the figure said again. Jack stepped forward. Who are you? The figure turned around. Zara gasped. That's you. It was Jack. Same face. Same eyes. But older. Colder. Something in his smile was wrong. I'm who you could have become, the figure said. If you hadn't run. If you hadn't failed. Jack's hand trembled. This isn't real. The figure stepped closer. Isn't it? You've felt it, haven't you? The memory that doesn't belong. The dreams that whisper secrets. You're more than you think, Jack. You were born for something greater. Stop, Zara warned, stepping in front of Jack. The figure ignored her. You were built for war. The final human weapon. The last hope. But you forgot. You chose peace. Jack closed his eyes. I never wanted to be a weapon. The fake Jack laughed. That's why you'll fail. Suddenly, the room shook. The figure vanished into black smoke. The ship's lights went red. Warning. Dark energy detected. Zara grabbed Jack's arm. We have to find the command core. Now. They ran through collapsing halls. Doors sealed behind them. Shadows clawed at the walls. Finally, they reached the command bridge. Zara placed her hand on the Velari emblem hidden beneath her armor. I will not let them take another ship, she whispered. Jack connected to the ship's memory core. More visions came. Images, symbols, flashbacks that weren't his. He saw Earth's final defense council. He saw himself, young, afraid, standing in front of generals. He's the one, someone said. He carries the old code. Jack's fingers shook as he accessed the ship's last logs. Project Dawnflare. Coordinates confirmed. Star system. N9 Helios. Status. Active. Zara leaned over. You found it. Jack nodded. I know where it is now. A growl echoed outside. They turned toward the main screen. A creature was crawling over the ship's hull, larger than anything they had seen before. Its body was made of stars, but twisted, like the darkness had eaten the light and left only a monster behind. Zira whispered, We need to go. They ran back to the shuttle. The creature slammed its claws into the warship. Metal tore like paper. As the small ship launched into space, the Everreach exploded behind them in a burst of blue and black fire. Zara and Jack didn't speak for a long time. Finally, Jack turned to her. I think I was part of something. A plan. Maybe even a prophecy. Zara nodded. And now? Jack looked at the new coordinates. Now we finish it. The darkness comes for them. Zara sat in silence, her eyes fixed on the small glowing screen inside the ship. The coordinates for Project Dawnflare blinked softly, like a heartbeat. Jack was at the controls, but his hands weren't steady. Something inside him had changed after what they saw on the Everreach. The vision. The older version of himself. The voice that wasn't his, but still spoke his thoughts. Do you think it's true? Jack finally asked, not looking at her. Zara didn't answer immediately. She was studying him, his tired face, the doubt in his voice. You mean that you're some kind of chosen weapon? Jack nodded. She took a breath. Maybe. But weapons don't cry when they lose people. You did. That makes you something more. Jack gave a weak smile. Thanks for that. I think. Their ship exited the void zone and approached the N9 Helios system. The sight outside the window made them both freeze. It was dead. The sun was blackened, twisted and cracked like broken glass. Its light had not gone out completely, but it flickered unnaturally, glowing red and purple. A halo of shadows circled it, moving like living smoke. What did they do to it? Jack whispered. Zira stared in horror. They're feeding on the star. Around the dying sun, old battle stations floated like skeletons. Giant ships lay silent in orbit. Some still had Earth and Velari markings. Some were unknown, possibly even older. And in the center, at the edge of the sun's corona, was a structure. A ring. It was massive, metallic, glowing with dim energy. Dozens of long arms extended from it like a spider reaching out to hold the sun itself. Zara leaned closer. That's it. Project Dawnflare. Jack slowed the ship. It's still intact. How is that possible? Suddenly. Boom. The ship shook. Red lights flashed. They've seen us, Zyra shouted. A black tendril of darkness had wrapped around the engine. Something had reached out from space itself and grabbed them like a claw. We're not getting through like this, Jack said, pulling hard on the controls. But the ship wouldn't move. More tendrils appeared, thick, oozing with black light, and started crushing the hull. We have to eject, Zyra yelled. Now. Jack slammed the emergency release. The cockpit burst open, and the two were launched in separate pods toward the Dawnflare ring. Jack tumbled through space, spinning, his breath loud in his ears. The stars spun, the sun flickered. Then, impact. He woke up inside a dark chamber. Metal walls, cold floor. His pod cracked open beside him. Everything was silent, except for the hum of deep, ancient machines. Zira, he called. No answer. He grabbed a small light and started moving down the corridor. The walls were covered in strange glowing lines, runes or wires, he wasn't sure. The place felt alive. Zira landed harder. She had hit part of the outer ring. Her shoulder was dislocated, but she popped it back into place with a painful grunt. She stood slowly, holding her side. But she didn't stop. She had to find Jack. She began walking down a corridor, weapon raised, eyes sharp. The air was different here, thicker, like something was breathing nearby. A whisper followed her. You always fight, even when it's hopeless. She turned quickly. Nothing there. More whispers. You think the human will save you. He'll fail, like the others. Zira closed her eyes. I've heard your lies before. The darkness hissed, but didn't stop. He's not like you. He's weaker. He's already breaking. Zira clenched her jaw. Then I'll carry him. I've carried worse. Jack reached the core chamber. Inside, a massive console sat at the center, surrounded by rotating metal arms. Above it, holograms flickered, images of stars, energy readings, and one blinking message. DAW and FLARE ready. INPUDDNA CQENC. Jack stared at the console. His hand moved toward it. Then, Selam. Something hit the floor behind him. He turned and saw himself again. But this time, it wasn't a ghost. It was a perfect copy. Same face, same voice, but eyes full of shadows. Jack backed up. What are you? I'm what you could be, the copy said. If you stop running. If you join the darkness. I'd rather die. Jack spat. The shadow Jack smiled. We all do eventually. But you were made to lead the end. Zira reached the chamber just in time to see Jack standing across from his dark copy. She didn't hesitate. She fired her weapon. The blast hit the fake Jack in the chest, but instead of falling, he absorbed it. Zira froze. The shadow Jack grinned. That's the problem with light. It burns bright, but it always fades. Then he rushed at her. Zira fought like a storm. She swung her blade, ducked, kicked. But the creature was faster, stronger. Jack grabbed a fallen energy rod and ran into the fight. Zira, move. He threw the rod. It hit the wall, causing an explosion that threw the creature back. Jack helped her up. You okay? I've been worse, she said, spitting blood. They turned to the console. Only one of us can activate it, Jack said. I think it has to be me. Zira nodded. Then do it. The creature began to rise again. Jack stepped forward and placed his hand on the console. It lit up. Energy flowed through him, into the machine. Alarms blared. DWNFLAOREINITIATD. The station began to glow, but the creature screamed and charged one last time. Zira blocked its path. Blade ready. You're not touching him. Light exploded through the chamber. The creature screamed as beams of pure energy pierced its body. It twisted and dissolved into smoke. Zira fell to her knees. Jack turned toward her, his skin glowing faintly. You okay? She smiled weakly. You shine brighter than I thought, human. Then the station shook. A voice echoed through the chamber. DAWNFLARE line. Star KILINC in 5 minutes. Jack helped Zira stand. We need to get out. Now. But how? She asked. Jack looked at the control console. A blinking button read, Emergency Jump Pod 2 available. He grinned. Perfect. They launched just as the Dawnflare fired. A beam of golden light erupted from the ring, piercing the heart of the corrupted sun. The dark tendrils around it burned away. The shadow in space screamed. The sun, once dying, roared to life again. From far away, their escape pod floated through the stars. Zira leaned back, her head on Jack's shoulder. You did it, she said. No, Jack replied softly. We did. She looked up at him, and for the first time in her life, she whispered the words she never thought she'd say. You're not just human, Jack. You're hope. The graveyard of stars. The pod floated through open space. No ship, no backup, no signal. Just two souls wrapped in silence and starlight. The emergency lights inside blinked red every few seconds. Zira sat with her back to the wall, her body still weak, but healing. Jack was at the small window, watching the stars drift by. At least, what was left of them. Ahead, in the darkness, was a place no map dared name. A zone the galaxy forgot, or chose to forget. Zira whispered, "We are entering the graveyard." Jack turned to her. "The graveyard of stars." She nodded slowly. "The final resting place of the Ancient Ones. The ones who fought the darkness first." Jack stared ahead. It didn't look like much at first, but as their pod drifted closer, he began to see it. Wreckage. Mountains of it. Old ships, massive and unfamiliar. Some looked like floating cities. Others were cracked in half, wires stretching into space like torn nerves. Glowing runes blinked on their sides, languages Jack didn't recognize. They moved silently, lifeless but full of secrets. Zira stood now, her voice quiet. "This is where light died for the first time." Jack whispered, "Why are we here?" She pointed at the navigation log still glowing on the pod screen. When the Dawnflare activated, it sent a final signal. A location, right in the center of the graveyard. The pod guided itself toward a massive object hidden behind a cluster of broken ships. As they moved closer, Jack's breath caught in his throat. It was a temple, or maybe a vault. The shape was smooth, ancient, and shining with soft golden symbols that seemed untouched by time or war. It looked like it didn't belong in space at all, as if someone had pulled it from a dream. Zira's eyes widened. "I've seen this in stories, old warrior scrolls. This is the Hall of Echoes." Jack frowned. "What is it?" She looked at him. "It's not a place. It's a memory. The final memory of the galaxy's first war with the darkness." The pod docked slowly against the temple. Jack took a breath. "Let's find out what the galaxy forgot." Inside, the temple was warm, not just in temperature, but in feeling. Golden lights danced across the floor. The walls were filled with carvings that moved. Yes, moved, like living history. Zira reached out and touched one. A figure appeared in front of them. It was tall, wearing armor made of starlight, and its face was hidden under a smooth silver mask. It spoke in a language they didn't understand, yet somehow they could feel the meaning. "We were the first flame, and we were the first to fall." The lights shifted. Another vision. War, endless and burning. Creatures of darkness tearing through golden cities. Great ships exploding. Stars collapsing into black holes. Zira watched in silence, her fists clenched. So much was lost. The voice spoke again. But the fire was never fully gone. We hid it. We passed it forward. A final image appeared. A small figure. A child. Human-looking. Surrounded by light. Jack's heart stopped. "Wait. That's..." Zira stared. "That's you." Jack stepped forward. "Why me?" "I don't understand." The walls answered. "Because the darkness feeds on despair. But you're kind. Humans are strange. You break, but you heal. You forget, but still believe. You remember love, even when the stars forget." Jack swallowed hard. "I don't feel special." "You are not," the voice said gently. "But you are willing. And sometimes that is enough." Suddenly, the lights dimmed. The floor shook slightly. Zira turned sharply. "Something's wrong." The walls flickered, symbols twisting into something darker. Jack stepped back. A new voice filled the air. Not soft, not warm. Cold, hungry, deep. "You dare awaken old memories." Zira pulled out her blade. "The darkness is here." The temple lights began to vanish, one by one. Shadows crawled from the corners, wrapping around the walls, erasing the golden carvings. Jack grabbed Zira's hand. "We have to go." But the doors had sealed. The voice returned, now louder. "Your light will join theirs. Your hope will rot here, forgotten like the rest." The golden figure returned briefly, flickering. "One truth remains, Jack Carter. Darkness is loud. But light is stubborn." A flash of energy burst from the carvings and opened a hidden path below the temple floor. Zara and Jack didn't hesitate. They jumped. They landed hard in a lower chamber, round and glowing faintly. Jack groaned. "You okay?" Zara winced. I stopped asking that question. In the center of the chamber stood something strange. A small device floating in the air, spinning slowly. It looked like a crystal wrapped in metallic vines. It pulsed with soft energy. Jack moved toward it. "What is that?" Zara asked. "I don't know, but it feels familiar." As his hand reached out, the device reacted. It unfolded, revealing a spark inside. A tiny sun. Then it spoke, this time in Jack's own voice. "Final protocol. Lightbearer DNA confirmed. Activation ready." Zara looked shocked. "You carry more than memory, Jack. You carry a key." He nodded slowly. Maybe this is the real weapon." But before they could think more, a scream tore through the chamber. They looked up. The darkness had followed. Through the cracks in the ceiling, a beast began to crawl. Massive, shapeless, made of screaming faces and writhing tendrils. It shrieked in a dozen voices. It was not a creature. It was pain itself. Zara stepped in front of Jack. "You need to activate it. Whatever that is. I'll hold it off." Jack grabbed her wrist. "You can't fight that alone." She smiled weakly. "I did before, remember?" He pulled her close. "Not anymore. We fight it together." The chamber filled with shadow. The beast dropped down, roaring. Zara leaped into the air, striking with her blade. Light flashed. Jack stood at the center of the room, hands on the device. He closed his eyes, remembered his sister, his home, the day Earth fell. He whispered, "This is for all of them." He activated the core. A shockwave exploded. Light burst from the crystal. The beast screamed as its body tore apart. Shadows peeled back like burned paper. Faces vanished. The chamber shook violently. Walls cracked. The temple was falling. Zara rushed to Jack. "Can you move?" Jack was glowing faintly, eyes golden. His voice was soft. "I feel everything." Zara pulled him up. "Save it for later. We're leaving." They barely made it back to the pod. As they launched away, the entire temple collapsed into a ball of golden energy and then disappeared in a silent flash. The graveyard behind them was quiet once again. But Jack and Zara didn't feel safe. Because they knew. The final battle hadn't started yet. The hand that reached back. The stars blinked slowly outside the small pod. Inside, it was quiet. Zara sat next to Jack, watching him carefully. He hadn't spoken in over an hour. His body glowed faintly from the energy of the device they found in the Hall of Echoes. His eyes were closed, but he wasn't asleep. He was listening. "Are you hearing them again?" Zara asked softly. Jack opened his eyes. "Not just hearing." He placed a hand over his chest. "They're in me now, the ancient ones. Their memories, their warnings, their hope." Zara frowned. "Is that safe?" Jack laughed weakly. "No, not even a little." She smiled. He looked at her, eyes more focused now. "They showed me something. A final place, where all this ends. It's not just a battlefield. It's the heart." Zara leaned forward. "The heart of what?" Jack turned to the screen. He input the coordinates. Unknown system. No name. No records. But Jack knew what it was. A heart of the darkness. They traveled in silence. As they approached the final coordinates, everything around them changed. Space itself became wrong. The stars disappeared. Time felt slower. The colors outside twisted into red and black spirals. They were inside a living storm. And in the center floated a giant black sphere, miles wide, covered in sharp edges, cracks, and what looked like screaming faces frozen in stone. Zara whispered, "That's not a station." Jack nodded grimly. "It's a mind. a living god. That's where it all comes from. He stared at it, and it's waiting. As they docked, their pod was pulled in automatically by invisible force. The inside was cold and endless. Black walls pulsed like veins. There was no light, only faint glows from the stone itself, like dying embers. The air felt like ash. Zira drew her blade. "We won't come back from this, will we?" Jack looked at her. "We don't need to come back. We just need to finish it." They walked deeper into the darkness. As they moved, the halls began to speak, not in words, but in memories. Zira heard screams, her soldiers, her family, her people calling her name, begging for help. She shook her head. "No, you're not real. You're dead, and I carry you forward." Jack saw his sister, her eyes full of tears. "Why didn't you save me, Jack?" He dropped to his knees. "I tried. I didn't know what was coming." A voice filled the chamber. "You are guilt. You are failure. You are alone." Zira turned and shouted, "No, he's not." She grabbed Jack's hand. And for the first time, he didn't shake. He stood. Together. They reached a great black door. It opened without touch. Inside was a wide open space, a massive void, with a single figure floating in the middle. It wasn't a body. It was more like a shadow wearing armor made of stars. Its face was a mask with no eyes. Its voice was every voice they had ever feared. "You bring light into my house." "Why?" Jack stepped forward. "Because I've seen what light does," he said. "It doesn't just burn. It shows people the way." "You are weak." "Maybe," Jack replied, "but I remember who I am." The creature laughed. "You are nothing." Zira stepped beside him. "Then why are you afraid?" The final battle began. The chamber exploded into motion. Black tendrils shot toward them. Zira sliced through them with speed and fury. Jack held the light core, now glowing like a sun. The shadows burned as he walked. But the creature adapted. It split into 3 forms, clones of Jack, Zira, and her lost commander. They surrounded them with lies and rage. Zira fought her past. Jack fought himself. The creature whispered to both, "She will die here, Jack, just like your sister. He will abandon you, Zira, just like everyone else." Zira's blade slowed. Her strength was breaking. Jack screamed as tendrils wrapped around him. The light was dimming. The creature laughed. "All your hope. Wasted." Then something happened. Zira fell. Her eyes closed. But she remembered something. Not war. Not pain. She remembered a hand. The first hand that ever reached back when she cried in the dark. Jack's hand. Her eyes opened. She grabbed her blade and stood. No, not this time. She ran through the shadows, slashing everything in her way, and reached Jack. He was fading. But then, she took his hand. Light exploded from them both. The shadows screamed. Their connection activated the true core of the light. It wasn't a weapon. It was a bond. Human and alien. 2 souls that refused to give up. That refused to forget. That chose each other. The chamber cracked. The shadow creature screamed in pain. Its body split apart, leaking starlight. Jack stepped forward, floating now, his body surrounded by burning golden energy. He looked at the monster. "No more lies. No more fear. You lose." He pressed the core to the ground, and it shattered. A blinding white flash swallowed the world. When Jack opened his eyes, he was lying in soft grass. Above him, stars. Real stars. Light again. He sat up quickly. "Zira." A voice from behind. "I'm here." He turned and saw her, whole, armor cracked but smiling. "You're glowing," she said. Jack looked at his hands. The golden energy was gone. "Is it over?" he asked. Zira nodded. "The darkness is gone." He laughed, then cried. She didn't say anything. She just sat beside him and leaned her head on his shoulder. They didn't need words anymore. 1 month later, ships from across the galaxy arrived. Earth colonies, Villari survivors, others long believed extinct. The galaxy was healing, and at the center of this new peace stood a human and a warrior. Heroes not because they were the strongest, but because they didn't let go. Final scene. The little Villari girl runs through a garden of lights. She stops when she sees Jack and Zira sitting on a bench nearby. "Are the stories true?" she asks shyly. Zira smiles. "Which one?" "The one where the light died and the warrior fought alone." Jack leaned forward. "That story's missing something," he said gently. The girl blinked. "What?" Jack held out his hand. "That she didn't stay alone. Light never dies." The stars returned. Not all at once, and not everywhere, but they began to shine again. One by one, systems came back online. Communication sparked between planets once thought lost. Signals crossed galaxies. Ships that had hidden for generations lifted off again, blinking like newborn suns. But across it all, people spoke only one name, Jack Carter, and beside his name, another, Zira of Villar. Together, they were remembered not as warriors, not as weapons, but as a symbol that light, once shared, never truly dies. 2 months later, rebuilding Villar, the planet was no longer silent. For years, Zira had walked its ashes alone. Now, it breathed again. Alien ships hovered above newly growing forests. Rebuilt cities rose slowly from the rubble, brick by brick. Survivors returned, some scared, some changed, but all full of purpose. Zira walked among them every day. She didn't wear armor anymore, only a long coat and a simple badge. People still bowed when they saw her. She always said the same thing: "Stand up. You carry the light now." In a quiet village near the edge of the sea, Jack stood on a rooftop, watching the waves. He had built the house himself. Simple, clean, full of sunlight. Trying to become a carpenter now. Zira teased, walking up behind him. Jack smiled. "Thought I'd try something peaceful for a change." She sat beside him. The breeze lifted her short silver hair. For a while, they didn't speak. Then Jack said, "Sometimes I still hear them." Zira nodded. The memories. He looked out to the sea. The screams, the loss, the whispers in the dark. She reached over and took his hand. "But what do you hear after that?" Jack looked at her hand in his. "You," he said quietly. Galactic Peace Council, Unity Summit. For the first time in history, dozens of species met in one place. On a neutral moon bathed in golden light, a wide round hall held leaders, scientists, engineers, and even children. At the center, Jack and Zira stood. They didn't speak as rulers. They spoke as witnesses. "We came here not to lead," Jack said, standing calmly, "but to remind." Zira stepped forward. "There was a time when we believed light could be owned, controlled, used as a weapon." She glanced at Jack. "But we learned something stronger." Jack raised his voice slightly. "Light isn't something you use. It's something you share." And with that, a new declaration was made. No more weapons made from fear. No more empires built on shadows. A new galactic code was born, centered on remembrance, rebuilding, and reaching out. Elsewhere in the galaxy, children of the light. In small towns and space stations, people told stories. Around campfires, in classrooms, in underground bunkers waiting for the surface to heal. Stories of the warrior woman who never gave up, and the human who reminded her she didn't have to fight alone. Children painted their faces gold and blue. They played with wooden blades and made drawings of stars held in cupped hands. They called themselves children of the light. They didn't believe in fear. They believed in each other. Back on Velar, the workshop, Jack leaned over a metal table, covered in wires, fragments of old star cores, and pieces of the light engine they had used to destroy the darkness. Zira stood by the window, sipping tea. "You're building it again," she said. Jack nodded. "But not as a weapon," he said. "As a beacon. A star that can't be swallowed." She tilted her head. "Think it'll work?" Jack smiled. "Only one way to find out." She walked over and placed her hand on his shoulder. "You're not the same man I met in that crater." Jack looked at her. "You're not the same woman either." She smirked. "I still fight better than you." They both laughed. One final memory. That night, Jack sat on the sand, watching the twin moons rise. Zira joined him quietly, wrapping a blanket around them both. He pointed up at the sky. "That star there, that's Earth's new colony. They're calling it New Horizon." Zira rested her head on his shoulder. "They'll need stories," she said. "Heroes." Jack shook his head. "They'll need teachers, gardeners, dreamers." He looked at her. "Think we can be that?" Zira smiled. "We already are." Closing scene. Years later. A young girl, part Velari and part human, runs into a classroom made of stone and starlight. She carries a book titled, "The Warrior and the Human: How the Light Returned." She stands before her classmates, excited. "My name is Elen," she says, "and this is the story of my parents." Darkness falls. It always does. But there is something it forgets. That light doesn't fight alone. It finds another hand, and together they reach back. And in that moment, darkness forgets how to win. The end.